So, transitions are just a natural part of being a human being. We're going to experience many of them through our lives. Now, depending on who you are, God's calling for your life, some will experience more, some will experience less, but we all will go through seasons of transition. And so, knowing that on the front end, it's a really good idea to figure out, okay, if I know I'm going to be going through these seasons of change, how can I do so in a way that truly honors Jesus, in a way that I can remain faithful and obedient to Him? And so, one of the first things that I consider is that really there is a season for everything. Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verse 1 says, "There is an appointed time for everything, and there is a time for every event under heaven." So, this should not come to a surprise that we leave one season, we enter into a next. God has appointed many different seasons for us to walk through. The thing is, we want to be faithful regardless of the season that we're in. Another verse that touches on this is 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 2. "Preach the word, be ready in season and out of season. Reprove, rebuke, exhort with great patience and instruction." And so, regardless of what season you're in, whether you're in one where you really feel like God is leading you in a powerful way, or maybe you feel one where you feel like a little bit of distance from God, regardless of how you're feeling, it's really important that we are prepared and that we're ready to embrace the season that God has us in. Now, specifically when we're dealing with seasons of change or transitions, I found a word that was really, really crucial to kind of forming my understanding of this. I'm going through a season of change right now, and me and my wife, we were talking to a couple who run a network of micro churches out of the St. Louis area. And they brought this word up to us the other day, and it felt so good to finally put some vocabulary to what I was feeling. The word is called liminality, and here's a good definition of it. Liminality, or a liminal space, can be defined as an in-between space. It is the space when you are on the verge of something new. You are between what was and what will be. You are waiting and not knowing about what will come. And this hit us like a ton of bricks. This is where we're at. This is exactly what we're experiencing. We know that God is moving us from one season into another season. We don't quite know what that looks like yet. We've got some specifics. We've got some understanding of it, but we're kind of, what I feel like is, at least, I feel like I'm trapped in this kind of in-between space and not knowing what to do. And really, I believe that God wants to use this time of liminality, this season of transition, not to make me feel trapped or my family feel trapped, but really to embrace some of the lessons that we learned from the previous season and to teach us some new things about where He's leading us. This is a very important time of life for me and my family, and I think for anyone going through a season of change, it's going to be important to kind of reframe our perspective to align with what God wants to do in that season. So one of the reasons why I don't really enjoy seasons of change myself is that they can be uncomfortable and they can be confusing. Now, the devil knows this, and he wants to utilize that against what God's trying to do in our life. And so I've found that there's two main ways that the devil tries to kind of circumvent this season of change and keeps us from really embracing what God's doing, and instead tries to get us to really avoid the plan of God for our life. So the first one is delay. The devil would love for you to delay moving through the season of transition into the new season, into the new calling that God has for you. And the reason for that is that the devil knows that if you go through this season, if you enter into this new one, there's going to be a new dynamic, new power, new influence that you'll have if you're walking with the Lord. And he's going to do all he can to avoid you to do that. I found that a lot of times people will delay for two reasons. One, they do not know what's to come, and they kind of fear the future. So there's this element of fear that keeps them from entering and transitioning into what God has for them. And the second one is that they become very comfortable and really enjoy the current season that they're in. Once again, it's not so much about our enjoyment of our current season. I believe that God does want us to enjoy and have pleasure wherever He has us, but It's really about his will. And so oftentimes what I found in my life is that means breaking away from that comfortable, safe place that you've grown accustomed to into this new adventure that God has for you. And that can be scary. So of course, delay is part of this temptation to kind of avoid the season of transition. I think this is really what the Israelites were experiencing. I'm going to read to you Joshua chapter 5, verse 5 through 6. It goes like this: For all the people who came out were circumcised, but all the people who were born in the wilderness along the way as they came out of Egypt had not been circumcised. For the sons of Israel walked 40 years in the wilderness until all the nation, that is, the men of war who came out of Egypt, perished because they did not listen to the voice of the Lord, to whom the Lord had sworn that he would not let them see the land which the Lord had sworn to their fathers to give us, a land flowing with milk and honey. The Israelites delayed and were actually then forced to kind of be in this new liminal season for 40 years in the wilderness. And so sometimes we might think that by delaying, we can just kind of avoid entering into a season of transition. I don't think that's the case. God's going to get you there probably one way or the other. And in the case of the Israelites, they were afraid of entering into that new land, the giants that lived there and the mighty cities and all these things that they weren't really realizing God had already given to them. They were seeing things in the natural and were really fearing that future season of theirs. And so what did God do? He said, okay, if you're going to delay, I'm going to put you in a different type of liminal season. And so that should be right there alone a really good motivation not to delay when God is telling you to transition. But there's the other side of the coin too. And if I'm being honest, this is the one that I fall prey to far more, and it's haste. I don't really like seasons of transition, and I'm sort of a forward visionary type of person. And so when I begin to realize I'm in a season of transition, one of my main temptations is to get through it as quick as I can. Now, I'm going to go into why there are some challenges related to these seasons, specifically for a type A person like me. But really, what I've found is that I rush through seasons of transition because I am still struggling to identify myself as who I am in God instead of what I can do for God. And so I'm so on about the mission and the vision that God has that I don't take the time to really understand that my security, who I am, my self-worth, my value is actually just in being a child of God. And during these times of transition, I often find myself feeling a little purposeless, feeling a little disappointed that I'm not doing this great big, accomplishing this great big mission for God, when I think in those times he's really saying, Tyler, it's time for you to get back on track with who you are in me rather than what you can do for me. And so we don't want to delay, but we also don't want to rush through this season because God has so many beautiful things that he wants to offer us. Proverbs 19:2 really says it well. It says, also, it is not good for a person to be without knowledge, and he who hurries his footstep errs. So what do we see here? We see that the devil is really going to try to get you on either ditch. He's either going to try to get you to delay entering in to the season of transition, which leads to your new calling, or he's going to try to get you to rush through it. Really, either ditch. He doesn't care which one you get in. He's just going to try to keep you there. While God wants you to hold this beautiful tension between the two, where we are abiding in his presence, where we are walking in line with the Spirit, and where we are really taking it one day at a time, listening to his voice, and entering through the season of transition with our eye on being faithful to all that God has for us.